full-time here at St James's Park. Newcastle United have beaten Brentford 2-1 to resume the season, really, because there was a lot of pressure coming into this game, a lot of unknowns about whether Newcastle would be able to deal with the come down from the cup celebrations. Obviously the weekend, 300,000 fans across the city, basically the entire city coming out to celebrate the Carabao Cup win, and that was looming large tonight, and there were lots of questions about whether Newcastle could handle the pressure of regaining themselves and pushing on for the last 10 games of the season with the Champions League race very much in their own hands. And they answered that question a little bit nervily at times, and ultimately they came out on top thanks to goals from Alexander Isak and an absolute thunderbolt from Sandro Tonali. Brentford came into this game having won their last 5 games on the road, conceding just once as well in that time, so it was always going to be a really difficult game. They are a team that packs the midfield, makes it very difficult for opposition sides, and have a lot of pace up front with Brian and Bumo and Johan Wissa, who can get at Newcastle's particularly ageing back line. So there's lots of trepidation in the air, as I said, and there were moments in that first half where Brentford had the control. The fans were slightly turning on, not on the team, but the nerves were coming out. And then when the penalty happened, and it was were Newcastle going to be able to break the deadlock again? When Alexander Isak went off, I don't know why Isak went off. We'll find that out from Eddie Howe, but you would imagine, having just conceded, that you wouldn't take off your star striker if you needed a goal without there being a reason. And so we're hopeful that there's nothing too serious around Isak, but we'll see later on. But yeah, just the way that Newcastle managed to win the game without being at their best, I think really stands them in good stead. I kind of wanted them to win in that way this time, rather than sort of having to blow Brentford out the water, because it was always going to be difficult. As I say, Brentford coming into this game were in a position where they could harm Newcastle. If they'd won tonight, they would have gone 3 points behind Newcastle as well. So that race for the European spots is really, really tight and really dangerous for any team slipping up. And there were some huge results tonight. Obviously Bournemouth losing to Ipswich is massive, but again we'll dive into that later in this week. But yeah, the fact that Newcastle were able to play sort of decently and in spells and roared on by the crowd, and that sort of reacting to the crowd, and 2 very, very good goals from the 2 best players that Newcastle really have at the moment in Isak and Tonali, it really shows that they can go all the way in this Champions League race now, because they don't have to be at their best, and that those moments can spring themselves, and you can trust the team to get over the line in third gear. There was a point earlier in this season when they really needed to play at their best to get anywhere near a victory. Now that isn't really the case, and I think we've got to really talk about Jacob Murphy, because that cross, again, I don't know what the stats are for him, but Isak and Murphy's link up this season has been absolutely phenomenal. That cross from Bruno Guimaraes' brilliant outward ball was great, and then Isak on the end of it. But for all the talk of Tonali and Isak, and they'll get the headlines, and obviously that'll be the narrative, that those 2 players stepped up for Newcastle on a difficult night. Props to Jacob Murphy. It wasn't his best night. There were some shows of his limitations, the lack of decision making, when he's got to think about things, all the things that we know about Murphy, and that's why Newcastle are looking for an upgrade on that right hand side. But he's done a brilliant job, and I think I wrote on my 442 piece, Eddie Howe is known for getting the most out of the players that he has, despite having all this apparent wealth behind him. And yes, Joe Linton and Miguel Almiron from the past have been the 2 players who've got the most attention in that sense. But I think Murphy might arguably be his best work if you look at how regularly this season he's contributed. Yes, you could argue it's a purple patch. Yes, you could argue that he won't be able to keep it up for a long period of time, but that's why Newcastle are looking for reinforcements. But the fact that they didn't get someone on that right hand side had the possibility of being really detrimental this season to their hopes, and lots of people were worried about their lack of output. But his consistency in terms of stats, and his consistency in what he brings, and the fact that he knows his job, he runs directly, he gets the ball in as quickly as possible for Isak, and that must be a dream for Alexander Isak. Lots to talk about Alexander Isak's future at the moment, and whether he needs to leave the club in the summer to better himself. and play with better players. But you know, nobody has been more prolific in terms of putting the ball on a plate for him this season than Jacob Murphy. He's one of the players who few would say is of the level befitting of a player like Isak. So it just goes to show that maybe Isak is in the right place, and this club is building. There was a lot, as I say, there was a lot of questions about what they were going to do tonight because of the possible hangover, because of the fact that we've seen in recent weeks that they don't always turn up when the chips are down, when there's not that nervous energy. I compared it in the build-up to Borussia Dortmund after the Lord Mayor's show. You know, they came into that game in the Champions League after beating PSG, and there was a sort of sense of, well, what now? And it didn't go well. But this is evidence that this team has learned from it. As I say, Brentford were in some ways the worst opposition Newcastle could have played tonight because of their recent run away from home, because of the fact they hadn't conceded goals, because of the fact that they are very, very tactically flexible. I mean, Thomas Frank, we all know how good he is as a coach and what he allows his team to do. They pack the midfield, they won the ball in transitions, and they hit with power going forward. But yeah, really Newcastle marshalled it really well, and fully deserved the victory in the end. And ultimately it's about taking the games down now. I think because the season's already sort of guaranteed to be one of the greatest ever seen, or if not the greatest ever seen by most Newcastle fans, because of the celebrations, because of the outpouring of emotion from the cup win. The fact that they've still got the Champions League could make it completely historic, and that's what the focus has got to be. Eddie Howe, he doesn't really get too emotional, get too high with the highs and too low with the lows, but the players have had a problem in the past, and the fans certainly have. Everybody got it right tonight. I think the atmosphere was great before, wore flags with another great tifo before the game, and you know, it was one of those games where Newcastle had to go in waves, and they did. There were points in the first half where they had to hang in, they did, and then they went again in the second half. This is a huge win because it's Manchester United next in the league on the 13th of April. 3 days later is the game in hand, the crucial game in hand, against another really good away side in Crystal Palace. So the next 3 games on top of this one, we're always going to decide the destination of the next few weeks, if you like, and Newcastle have come through this one. They've answered a lot of questions about their mentality, I thought. Joe Linton, powerful in the midfield. Joe Willock, again, when he came on again, he came at a difficult point with Callum Wilson just after the equaliser, just after Isak goes. There's a real possibility that kills the momentum, but Newcastle went again, they rose, and everybody found the next gear. I think that's really important. There was no real threat towards the end. There was obviously nervy moments, 8 minutes of stoppage time, so I don't know where the referee got them from, but I didn't feel like Brentford were ever going to equalise once Tonali scored the winning goal, and that's the difference that Newcastle have. I think it's shown tonight. Nobody in the race for fourth, Man City aside, has a player like Isak up front or a midfielder like Sandro Tonali. Those 2 players can absolutely run the games for Newcastle, and they will be crucial going into the next few games. It's going to be a huge end of the season. Thanks very much for joining me on this video. Like, share and subscribe to the channel. I'll be back with another video later in the week. See you later. Cheers.